Thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna switch over here. There we go. Um, Thank you for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here and um, and excited to share my work. And also, I am be part of the Mountain Lion Foundation. So thank you for inviting me to give this talk. And we're coming up on Valentine's Day, so it's pretty appropriate. I wanted to just share a little bit about, kind of who I am and what prompted me to really start comparing, animals and people, because in science, usually we tend to frown upon anthropomorphizing animals, but I really think about it more like I zoomorphize people because we are animals. And, as an animal behaviorist who's passionate about studying animals, I started noticing sort of similarities between ourselves and other species. And, we are animals and we share an evolutionary history with lots of other species. And because of that, we have certain tendencies, we have certain behaviors that have their roots in biology. And I really believe my philosophy is that by looking deeply at what we do and why we do it and whether we're achieving the outcomes that we say we want, in this case, in our relationships and in our families, that if we think about that in a context of sort of looking through a biological lens, we might be able to make better decisions or better choices and see if the things that we're doing make sense. And in that sense, we have an advantage over other species. We could get self-help books. We can, choose our behaviors to a certain extent. And I began exploring this really with the first book, Wild Connection, really because I was taking stock of my own sort of tragic love life. And I realized that if a chicken could make a better decision than I could, that maybe there was something worth paying attention to, especially since I studied mating systems as my, particular area. And so that's where, kind of I got started in thinking about this. And and then the other thing is that we have this idealized version of what relationships look like, what families look like. And the reality is that more often it's a bit like this. And you know and so what is that about? Why do we have, this version, and there's always a sunset involved, and the reality is this? So where's the disconnect? And so I had an idea. And my idea was, I wondered if by understanding the strategies that other animals use to navigate their relationships and their families, if we could apply that to ourselves, would we see better outcomes? Could we be more successful? Would we even have a bit more fun? So, with all the animals, my rationale for this was pretty simple. With all the animals that we see out there, you never see some of the things that you see in humans. You don't see, for example, female mountain lions running around confused about whether or not they can get a date or find a partner. You don't see male harlequin ducks chasing down females only to lose interest in them once they've caught them. And on a more serious note, you don't see domestic violence in the faithful and monogamous prairie vole. And in fact, you don't see any violence in partnerships that are long-term cooperative partnerships in other animals that we do see often in human relationships. When it comes to parenting, you don't see ringtail lemurs in the community judging or giving moms grief for feeding their kids whenever they need to eat. You also don't see orangutan moms leaving their infants to sleep alone in their own nest. In fact, they co-sleep for up to 6 or 7 years. And again, when it comes to abuse, you don't see mountain lion moms setting boundaries with physical aggression and violence. And as a species, we perpetrate a tremendous amount of violence, physical and mental, on our offspring, which is not what we see in other species. So, with that, I set off to test the idea, and I'm bringing to you the animal guide to finding love and raising kids. And I can't tell you everything that I found, so I've got just a few nuggets. And I wanted to test this idea. So, using a few examples, I'm going to highlight some of the basic principles that other animals use when it comes to finding love and raising a family. When it came to dating and finding love, I could have just stuck with the literature. I'm good at reading papers and synthesizing ideas, but I'm also a field biologist. So I decided to kind of donate my love life to this experiment and go out into the field and collect, the dating field and collect some data. I love data, and and who says science can't be fun? So the end result of that was that I drank a lot of coffee. If you're single, the apps, and whether you're on Cupid or Bumble or whatever new ones they've got. Usually, it's a coffee first date. There were a few happy hour beverages, and there were a few dinners. Of course, only one went this well. So I also even tried a speed dating event because I was fascinated with speed dating. And now, not all dates went well. In fact, most of them didn't, but they were all really informative. And everything I discovered really applies whether you are dating or even if you're already in a long-term relationship. So I'm going to offer you a few key takeaways with a few examples. My favorite example is Flipflop, man. and he was not this age, and but the point of this picture is this is about as much effort as this particular date put into his appearance. He actually showed up with tank tops, ripped Bermuda shorts, and of course, well, flip-flops, which I think says it all. It was not a very good first impression. Now, one could say, okay, well, you're just being really superficial and you're paying attention only to appearances. But the reality is, it was the equivalent of a male peacock showing up like this. Something tragic has happened to this male peacock. But nevertheless, they usually show up like this. And so females would dismiss this male immediately. And we might like to think that because we have these sayings, don't judge a book by its cover. But the reality is that we know in humans within 1/10 of a second, you've decided whether somebody is not just attractive, but trustworthy, friendly, and competent. And that's faster than most of us, at least myself, can wink at somebody. And so the question is not, is this good or bad, but is there a reason why we make such fast judgments based on first appearance? And so I want to do a little experiment, and I think the guests, I'm not sure if they can react. Is that possible? Whoops. So I'm not sure if the guests can participate in the chat.
Yeah. Hi, Jennifer. They can participate in the chat.
Okay.
We didn't set up any kind of polling though. If you
Oh,
want
no,
polling,
it's not a poll. We could you could do a wave or a thumbs up or an A or B in the chat. So what I
Yeah, we
wanted
could
to
do that.
do,
Not a problem.
Yeah, okay, great. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show a picture. You briefly saw it already, which is about as fast as I'm going to give you the time to look at it. So I'm going to show you an image of two faces, and because it's another species, I won't ask if you find one more attractive than the other, but which one you prefer to look at, A or B. And so I'm going to flash the photo for very quick. And then if you feel like participating, you can just type in the chat A or B. Okay, let's go. There we go. Okay. Okay, so this is great. We get a few A's, we had a question mark, we had a B, we got another B. They look the same. I showed it very quickly. So now I'm gonna kind of pause on it a little bit longer. All right, so in this case, A was digitally altered to be 100% symmetrical, and B was digitally altered to be 50% symmetrical. And so essentially, if we were to draw a line through their face, right, the one B is a little off center, and you know. You may have heard about this kind of phenomenon where symmetry is preferred, and there's a reason for that. Now, for peahens, it goes beyond just flashy males, right? It turns out peahens are extremely choosy. They're so picky that they only mate with males that have over 150 spots. Those are the only ones that are considered super sexy. Now, how do females know that males have over 150 spots? Are they running around counting spots? They are not. They actually, it turns out, scientists have discovered that males that have over 150 spots are symmetrical. So, and this is not the only trait that matters. Now that we're here for the Mountain Lion Foundation, I want to talk about the scent of desire. So it applies to us as well. We are obsessed with pheromones and perfumes and colognes, all with this idea that we can be more attractive. And yet we tend to believe that we fall in love at first sight. So I usually tell everyone, I smelled you from across the room. You fell in love at first smell. And it turns out that smell is linked to these genes called major histocompatibility complex genes, or MHC for short. So pheromones, your particular pheromones that you give off, are a reflection of your genetic makeup on these MHC genes. And these genes are linked to immunity, our immune function. And so if you're more similar to someone in your genes, you're less attracted to their scent. And we know this is true for people, for prairie dogs, for primates, for birds, and maybe, even though it hasn't quite been investigated, mountain lions. Now, when it comes to mountain lions, smell is really, really important. I'm going to play the video here. I'm not sure if it has sound or not, but so males have places in the community where they advertise. These are called scrapes. They're community scrapes. And males go and they make a little pile, and then if they're really keen, they might defecate or urinate on it to leave their smell there. And then females, like this female, come in and they visit these areas and they sniff all of this stuff. And if they're really, really excited about a particular male, because they're also very choosy, they may call out or caterwaul. And this sound can be heard up to 5 miles away. And incidentally, obsession is, it's an attractant actually for cats. And it's because it uses a pheromone called civitone. So if you wear obsession, you might attract more than another person. So this brings us to tip one: be choosy. Be picky, very picky. And if you're one of those people who's heard from friends or family, like, that are trying to be helpful, you're just being too picky. Don't worry. Now you have science and a slew of other animals to back you up, that say that are on your side. Be choosy, and it's perhaps the most important rule of thumb. Now, physical attraction is only the first pass. It's only one trait. And when it comes to animals that are looking for long-term partners, they're also pretty picky on other traits that reflect compatibility, and personality, even. So, bottom line, be picky. Unfortunately, I did not have a date with Tyson Beckford, but I am using this image to illustrate that false advertising doesn't fly. So I had a date set up. I, met on one of the apps, or Match. I can't remember. And we were supposed to meet at a cafe, and I showed up a few minutes early. And about 30 minutes late, somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hi, Jennifer." And I did not recognize the person because he didn't look anything like his picture. So if you're computer savvy, or you have a computer savvy friend, or filters now on all these apps where you can Photoshop your photo, for your online profile, it's not really a great idea. And that also applies to stretching the truth on your interests. Like, sure, honey, I love to go antiquing. And so we only have to look to other animals to know that this is not a good approach. So what you're looking at now is a movie of two male elk, and you never see hawks with claw extensions, and you never see elk with fake antlers. Right now, imagine if one of them had fake antlers. There's only two possibilities for that male. A, he would fight and die, or he would run away because he has hollow antlers. Either way, he wouldn't get to reproduce because females watch this fight. And so he's clearly the loser. And females are watching actually on the bank, right? And they choose the winner. And the reason that there's another one coming. um, and so the bottom line is females choose the winner, right? Because there's a link between quality and performance. There are checks and balances in other species. Cardinals don't have, a salon to go into to become redder. They are as red as their diet allows. And so females, when they make a decision about a male based on appearance, they're making a decision based on accurate information. We call these things honest signals. Now, there's largely this largely prevents deception, and I'm going to give you an example that kind of flies in the face of that. But some animals do try to get away with pretending to have more to offer than they really do. But of course, it rarely works because of tip number one, which was to be choosy. So often it doesn't work. There is one exception, and that is the long-tailed dance fly. So full disclosure, um, honesty is thrown out the window for this particular species. Females, they receive a lot of their much needed protein from males. So males make a package like dinner, and it's called a spermatophore, and it's rich in protein, and it accounts for about 30% of the male's body weight. So this is the equivalent of taking a date to a five-star restaurant that costs a third of your salary for the week, right? Except in this case, it's more than that because they really only get one shot. So males are really picky because they don't want to give it to a female that they're not going to get the most out of that interaction. And so they like big females because big females produce more eggs. So you get kind of more bang for your buck. And females compete very intensely for these prizes, this package, this dinner. And so some females lie. And how do they do it? I know it doesn't look like much. I don't know if you can see the pointer, but this is the abdomen. And so the bigger the abdomen, the more the male prefers that particular female. Now, some females who aren't very big at all start to swallow air. They just gulp air, and this makes their abdomen get bigger and bigger. And so it inflates and makes them look bigger than they are. So they trick males. It kind of works. It only works about 30% of the time. But at the end of the day, the rule is, right, the tip is there's only one thing to do: be honest, be yourself, have some flair, but only flash honest traits. And of course, the idea is to be honest about all of your traits, not just physical ones. And thankfully for us, as opposed to this poor elk or a cardinal or other species, there's so much variation in what other people find appealing or attractive, from appearance to personality to hobbies and interests, that there really is somebody for everybody. And that's the good news for us. Okay. There was a movie not that long ago called, well, I mean, it must have been a long ago, maybe a decade now. He's not that into you. And so if you're asking this question, are they really into me? Well, if you have to ask it, the answer is no, probably no. Showing interest is often costly. It takes a lot of energy and time and resources, whether it's the courtship feeding of cedar waxwings, or the serenading of gibbons, or the sultry dance of the flame bowerbird, right? And even including building a bower, presenting berries. There's a tremendous amount of effort that's being put in. So, tip number 3 is to assess interest. We tend to think of this as keeping score if you're in a long-term relationship. And I argue that that is perfectly appropriate. Both partners, whether you're just dating or you've established your relationship, need to constantly be assessing interest. And if one of the individuals is not reciprocating, that is usually a telltale sign that there's a problem. And reciprocation is crucial to long-term success. Okay. So those are the top 3 tips for the dating side. And I wanted to include parenting because, well, once you date and mate, there can be consequences, otherwise known as children. So, so for all species, so this brings us to parenting, right? So this is the second book I wrote. Now, in this case, I didn't experiment. I didn't go out and have a litter and collect data on parenting techniques. Instead, I talked to parents, asking wildly inappropriate questions in coffee shops, on planes, and the good news is that people love talking about their kids and how they're raising them. In fact, I think basically parenting is an even bigger topic than relationships, so there's even less I can share. But I dove headfirst into the literature. I talked to parents, made some field observations of parenting, and I'm going to share again a few key findings about that. So the first thing, for all species where newborns rely on adults to take care of them, it's pretty critical that parents and even offspring quickly figure out who each other is. Now, some kids are less discriminating. So goslings, along with ducklings and a myriad of other species, they imprint on the first big thing, big enough that moves, basically. It doesn't even have to be alive. It could just be a robot. It's like the brain of the inexperienced little baby goose says something is moving, that must be mom or dad. And this works for them because they're what we call precocial, which in our sort of everyday language we know as precocious, so more advanced for their age. And they don't need to be fed by mom and dad so much as led by mom and dad. So they can afford to be less discriminating. For us and other species where kids are born helpless and dependent, there are several ways that we form an initial bond, and even before we're born. So, baby dolphins come out whistling, just like human infants come out crying. And each dolphin has a signature whistle. It's like a name that other dolphins recognize and know. But when they're first born, they kind of haven't found their voice, so their whistle changes a little bit over the course of a few weeks. And that means two things. One, that mom has to recognize baby's whistles even as it changes. And two, baby has to come out recognizing mom's whistle. And so a few weeks before babies are born, the mom starts whistling intensely. What does that have to do with us? Well, a lot of moms start talking to their belly, right? And it turns out that when human infants are tested within 12 hours of being born, they prefer the sound of their mother's voice. And they also prefer the sound of their father's voice if he's been talking to them. And then within just a few hours of physical contact, mothers can recognize their baby from a photograph, and fathers can recognize their child from the pad on the hand, the soft spot, right? When it comes to crying, both moms and dads can recognize the sound of their infant within 48 hours. But here's the kicker. And this is accuracy of 100%. To continue to recognize their infant's cry, both mom and dad need to spend a minimum of 4 hours in physical contact. Otherwise, accuracy falls from 100% to 25%. Incidentally, kind of circling back to the pheromones and MHC genes, relatives like grandparents can identify their newborn grandkids by smell alone. They don't have to ever see them. You just take t-shirts and you put them in a pile and they can pick out their newborn grandkid. So a lot of us think infants smell wonderful. So eau de baby is quite powerful stuff. Now, another thing that comes up is, Mom, where are you? So mountain lion kittens, when they meow, it has the largest frequency of all of the mountain lion vocalizations, over twice as large as those for the caterwauling, which, remember I said that travels 5 miles. But because that's kind of dangerous, their vocalizations are much shorter in duration, so they don't propagate as far, right? Even though the frequency range is double, the distance that it travels is much shorter. And mom also whistles to help kids catch up, and kids call out to their mom when they can't find her. For mountain lion cubs, by the time they're 3 months old, they can follow mom about a kilometer away. But let's face it, their legs are pretty darn short, and so everybody's calling out to each other to keep track and catch up. And for mountain lions, there hasn't been a lot of information on individual recognition between mom and cubs based on vocalization alone. But it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense if they didn't get to know the particular meowing of their kittens, and if the kittens didn't learn the whistle of their mom. So even though it hasn't been investigated to my knowledge yet, it would be an interesting study. I would not be surprised if that wasn't happening. So tip number 4 in our fourth tip, which is the first one in parenting, is hold them close. Most other species are in constant physical contact with their infants for some period of time immediately after birth to ensure bonding. This can just be moms or both moms and dads, depending on the species. Human infants, so research on human infants born by cesarean section found that they do much better in terms of cortisol levels, stress responses when they're placed on skin to skin contact with dad instead of in a basket next to mom. So this applies to both moms and dads. And sometimes, sort of culturally, we have a narrative that dads aren't as important, but none of the research supports um, that interpretation, right? And so the other thing is, even before the baby has been, this is even more potent if the baby hasn't been cleaned, where it's still covered in amniotic fluid, which also calms the baby down. So letting them stay, not washed for a while is also very helpful. Another thing that happens in parenting is feed me, please. So is a universal need for offspring that require direct parental care, including us who are fed by our parents. Now, in humans, there's a lot of fuss about breastfeeding. So before I talk about it, I want to let everyone appreciate for a moment that we humans are mammals and not the legless Sicilian, which is what you're looking at. It's a legless amphibian. And now, when it comes to feeding their babies, they can't make their own milk per se. Instead, mom's skin, the outer part of her skin, becomes thick and it kind of bubbles with fat and protein made up of the same stuff, incidentally, very similar stuff as breast milk. And the little baby Sicilians, well, they come out with razor sharp teeth and they just eat the outside of mom. So if you're female and you're feeling a tad relieved to be human right now, excellent. So now we'll just talk briefly about breastfeeding. Got milk. The milk produced by mammary glands is magical. It's magical stuff, whether it's coming from a hooded seal or a human or mountain lion. The hooded seal produces milk that is over 60% fat, while humans come in at a really measly 3.8%. Why is that? It has to do with duration. Hooded seals, hooded seal moms are done after 4 days, and they're delivering 45,000 calories a day to their baby. So, um, you know, before I talk about how we actually need to learn to nurse our babies, I want to make a special mention of baby drool. I've never been fond of baby spit, but I have a new respect for it, and maybe you will too, because it turns out that the combination of baby drool and breast milk in humans makes hydrogen peroxide in large enough quantities to kill staph bacteria and salmonella. So it's magic. Tell you, and there's a lot of evidence that breastfeeding is best. And we are fortunate that if one is unable to, we have alternatives. But we don't do it, and we don't do it for long enough, at least in contemporary westernized societies. The average around the world is about 2 years. And here, without going into the social obstacles that mothers face, which incidentally is unheard of in any other species, excuse me. When it's done, it's for fewer than 6 weeks on average. And we also have a sort of stigma that it's supposed to be automatic. And this brings us to tip number 5, which is teach me how. Some babies get right on it, and mom and baby have no problem. But by and large, we, along with tamarins, chimps, baboons, macaques, we have to learn how to nurse our offspring. They learn by watching other females. So our social barriers are actually preventing women from having the benefit of watching and learning so that they can successfully feed their kids. There are some countries that provide women with support and help and home visitation. But by and large, because we have these social obstacles that require it to be done behind closed doors, um, we're preventing other women from learning. So, breast is best, but we need to learn. We are the only species, social or otherwise, that actively impedes, condemns, and shames mothers for feeding their kids and also for being unable to feed their kids, right? All of this misdirected behavior that is cultural in origin defies our biological origin and is ultimately hurting our kids. Getting them out of the den, at some point, you can't wait. You hope, like, you've succeeded. You sent them off into the world to be the best version that they could be. And just as with us, parenting isn't just about providing material needs, it's about teaching them how to be and move in this world. Mountain lion moms are single moms. And one thing that we need to learn and they need to teach their kids, as well as, all animals, killer whales, honey badgers, is what to eat. And they have a lot to teach their kids, including how to fetch dinner. So for a long time, it's been thought that mountain lions eat deer most of the time. And a colleague of mine who has done scat analysis on mountain lions, genetic analysis, so we can screen every single mammal in there, taking the fecal sample that you find in the wild, processing it. And it turns out not only do they scavenge often, but they eat a lot of different things. And in southern Arizona, they'll eat javelina, rabbits, and deer, but they're not exclusively deer feeders. They actually have a pretty broad diet, which was a surprise because you tend to only find the bones of deer. And so if you just pick through bones, you get an impression that they have a really narrow diet. But actually, they're not picky eaters. Now, some kids are like black-footed ferrets and are picky eaters. In fact, for ferrets, they pretty much only eat one thing. And about 50% of human parents are dealing with a picky eater. Um, and and so for black-footed ferrets, they only eat prairie dogs, right? If you have a picky eater in the family, it is not inconsequential. It is not without consequences, basically. Picky eater kids have lower amounts of vitamin E, all of the B vitamins, and iron. We are not made to eat only pizza, spaghetti, and chicken tenders, or whatever the favorites are for kids. So, what is one to do? Well, this is where two birds, great tits and blue tits, can help us. And the way that they can help us is, well, scientists were curious. These birds live side by side, but they eat in different parts of the forest, right? So blue tits are better suited for higher up in the canopy, and great tits for lower down in the canopy. And as a result, their diet is different. And so they were curious, scientists were curious about whether or not the chicks learned to eat from their parents, or if they were sort of made to eat only certain things, right? If they were adapted to eat certain things, or if they learned. And so what did they do? They swapped eggs. So they basically put, blue tits into great tits nests, and vice versa. And what happened is that cross-fostered chicks picked up the feeding habits of the parents that raised them. So even if they had some adaptations to eating certain things based on the environment that they're typically found, when they were swapped into a new environment, they basically ate what their parents ate. You can probably see where this is going. and and so trying things is what it takes to make the switch. And we know with kids that it takes 8 to 15 attempts to get them to try a new food. And most parents give up after 3 tries. So that's why it's just try it times 15. Honey badgers eat 50 different food items, and they have to teach their kids to handle bees, cape cobras, scorpions. Mountain lions have to teach their kids to take out, all kinds of different animals. And I think we can manage a little bit of broccoli. Um, and now I come to sort of something that I'm working on in a new book, thinking about more societal kinds of issues. And I kind of want to leave you with empathy before we open up for questions. We are social creatures. And I think there's one more thing we can teach our kids to be successful, cooperative, empathetic individuals. You might be wondering, why am I showing you a picture of 4 rats? Well, you might notice that each rat is a different color. And what we know is that rats, when their litter happens, they are basically all different colors in the litter. And we also know from experiments with rats that they will help another rat. If another rat's in trouble, they will go to the aid of that fellow rat, even if it's not their friend. They don't know that rat. Even a lot of them, most of them will forego a food treat to go help a distressed fellow rat. When scientists manipulated the litters so that they raised them with all one color, so instead of a diverse litter, they took out all the colored ones and maybe put in a all gray, or they made them all black or all white. Those rats, when they grew up, only helped rats that looked like them, because they only helped rats that they saw similar as themselves. And so the point there is that when it comes to empathy, the more diverse we are, the broader our capacity for empathy, because we see more others as ourselves. So to me, I think that if we really want to raise kids and have a society that is empathetic and cooperative and nonviolent and non-aggressive, which a lot of us say that we want, this is part of it. So with that, I will finish and be happy to take any questions.
All right, looks like our first question is from Carolyn Straub. Carolyn, please ask your question.
Where did you find these comparisons between animals and people?
So this is really great. So, great question. So, I'm very familiar with the animal literature, right? And so, I, when I really thought about both books, I made a list of all the things I knew about all of the components that go into dating or mating, courtship in other animals, and also in parenting. And and then I hit the literature for humans. So both books, so Wild Connection, as much as I talked to friends to kind of build those stories for which I presented the information, I went to the literature, the peer-reviewed scientific literature that dealt with humans, and found those connections. So, for example, there's a bird where the ring around the eyes, it's red in this case, is a real clear signal to females that the male is of good quality. And I correspondingly found that we have a ring around our eyes, right? And it's called the limbal ring. And individuals that have a thicker limbal ring are rated as more attractive. So they did experiments. And it also turns out that the limbal ring predicts the thickness or thinness of it is related to certain diseases like glaucoma, and also other genetic diseases and age. So it is information that we use that we don't know in our conscious sort of walking around that we use, but when they've done experiments, these things are revealed. And so I really just read, and the first book, Wild Connection, I think it was 250 peer-reviewed papers, both human and animal, other animal studies. And for raised by animals, it approached almost 350 papers. And so just basically went right to all of the science.
Okay, our next question is from Andrew. Andrew, please ask your question.
Hi, I was wondering about in species where there's female sexual selection, if the way that they're judging their mates is kind of based on comparing the available mates that are around them, or if it's kind of an objective judgment. So for instance, if a female only saw like some males that weren't particularly colorful, would she just pick the best among them, or is there kind of a standard that she would just not mate at that point?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. So it's going to vary from species to species. I wrote about and I think about the poison dart frog, the one that looks like it has blue jeans on, with the blue legs and the red body, the strawberry poison dart frog. So a lot of females will use a trade up philosophy. So this is one example, the strawberry poison dart frog. So she will mate with the first male she encounters and then mate again with a better male. Right. And so also for the Adzuki bean beetle, if you've ever had Japanese food or desserts, you might know Adzuki bean paste. There's a bean beetle. And they also, because they never know if they're going to run into another male. So you settle for what's in front of you and then you trade up. You never trade down. Now, of course, it's going to depend on the species, and there may be situations where a male may be of such poor quality, but a lot of times females will settle with a male and then mate outside of that relationship. This can go for birds as well, primates, and of course humans. So they may settle for one male and then just mate outside of that dynamic to diversify the genetic makeup of their offspring or secure additional resources. That's also another strategy.
All right, Bob, you are up next. Please ask your question.
Hi, thank you for the seminar. I think it was on one of your last, if not the last slide, about empathy and the rats. And I'm not asking about self-awareness, but I thought I heard that you say that the rats were more empathetic with rats that looked like themselves. And this kind of a compound question. So that does imply, if that's what you said, did that imply then that rats know what their self looks like? Not sure I'm wording this very well.
Oh, yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And don't worry, I understand. Okay.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah. So no, it's really what they observe out around them. Right. So it's not that they know what they look like. It's that they were raised with a lot of different looking individuals. So to them, another rat can be anything. It can be white, it can be gray, it can be brown, it can be polka dotted, whatever.
Bingo.
Right. And then when they're raised in an environment that has a uniform color of a rat, it's not that they know they could be the opposite color, but every rat that they encountered looked a certain way. So to them, that is what a rat is. Right. It's familiarity of what you're exposed to. So they can manipulate that by manipulating the environment. This doesn't happen normally. Normally, you have diversity in the coat colors in a litter, right? And so, but if you artificially, so the point there is that you are taught to be biased.
Got it. Thank you. That does clarify it, and it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. No. Fantastic question. Thank you for asking that.
And I guess maybe
I felt like there was a follow-up.
Oh, I just started to say, I guess since my parents involved us with many different races and creeds as we were growing up, that's why my brothers, sister, and myself tend not to be very prejudiced about folks.
Yeah, and it applies to cultures and, everything, right? So, and travel, if you've been to many different places, you have it's just a different perspective. And so yeah, I mean, I think that, exposure to whether it's physical appearances, cultural experiences, whatever, is what generates a sense of you're similar to me. And we are, like rats, will help and be empathetic towards individuals that we feel are more like us. And it's interesting because my whole purpose with what I do is to show how similar we and other species are. We have the same problems, the same challenges, the same social issues in some cases. And it's because people can't be empathetic to something they can't relate to. And so by breaking down by revealing the places where we're similar, I'm hoping to open the door for people to go, oh, well, and so a lot of times they do it with humor, but it's like, oh, I didn't know that they have the same problem that we have. Okay, I feel like it's more like me. I'm more empathetic. I'm more willing to save, conserve, help. And for a species like mountain lion, it's predators in particular, it becomes really difficult because you've got to, and that's why I care about being able to do that and to do this, is because for some species where people, not me and maybe not all of you, but a lot of people have really, strong feelings in a negative way. If you can show, well, you're not so different from this mountain lion, and if you can see that, you have a capacity maybe to be more thoughtful and more empathetic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric, you are next. Please ask your question.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. And my question or request kind of follows along the path the prior gentleman started. And I was wondering if you could talk a little on how different human cultures have different mating rituals, traditions, mores, and taboos, etc., and how kind of a blanket assessment between humans and the animal world seems to be like finding differences between different actual species and their respective mating rituals.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And so yeah, there is a tremendous amount of diversity in human cultures with respect to relationships. And, I think in many kind of westernized cultures, we have a narrative of it's monogamous or patriarchal, or, males will be males and they want multiple mates. But the reality is that you have over 50 cultures where females have multiple husbands. And that's today. There's a tremendous amount of diversity. And I think that we fail to appreciate the diversity of desires or perspectives for the way that people can have relationships. So part of that is part of what I'm doing in showing the diversity in other species. I actually talk a lot about diversity in other species. Of course, I pick up on some of the themes of, sort of westernized dating relationships, but I'm also really highlighting how we're not doing it very well. if we really want certain types of relationships, and we really believe, and I don't actually believe that all humans are built for monogamous, lifelong relationships. I think there's some squirrels among us, and there's some, there's divorce in other animals too. So there's serial monogamy, there's polyamory, there's all kinds. And I don't think that we leave a lot of room for those conversations in our cultures. And I think that we also, by realizing that if you say you want to have a monogamous, cooperative, long-term relationship, you have to act a different way than what we're doing. And the question is not that that's the best relationship, but it's what we say we're wanting to do. And I try, at least in the book, to break down the walls and the boundaries of that may not be what's appropriate for you. That may not be what you want. I don't know what the taboos are, but there aren't really any in the animal kingdom, in the other animal kingdom. You have homosexual partnerships. You have right now, normally bald eagles are, mate for life, one male, one female, but you've got a partnership that's Valor 1 and Valor 2, two males with a female. This is their second season. You have some partnerships where they're together all the time. You have others where French angelfish spend 50% of their time apart. You have infidelity, but social monogamy. So you form a partnership, but you have other partners. So I really talk about it all, and I'm not promoting a particular narrative. And I think that we don't appreciate the diversity in human mating systems any more than we appreciate it in other animal mating systems.
I can go, yes.
So I think we need to change the way we have a conversation about what our relationships look like. And in order to do that, we have to it's also great to use animals, because nobody gets really offended if you're talking about, an albatross that had a little affair for 2 years and then went back to its original partner.
My background's in marine mammalogy
Yeah.
in the Northwest, and I frequently encounter visitors, becoming, now, of course, not during the pandemic,
Right.
but who want to know about my work with orcas, and I have to tell them of some of the orca mating rituals and behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like I've got 3 heads when I tell people these things.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's certainly been one of the more interesting aspects of my career.
Sure. And here's the thing, right? I'm not saying that because we see it in other animals, it's something we should do ourselves. That's sort of a fallacy, right? I'm really pointing out we have, and this is also for parenting, we say we want certain things. We need to behave in ways that actually lead to that outcome. And I point out where we're not. Orcas are fantastic if you want to have your kids never leave home. In terms of family, depending on whether they're transient, residential, or, other, they have different dynamics. But so, as I'm sure so yeah, it's, I think just more conversations between people need to happen with less. But, we are a species that is influenced deeply by cultural evolution, which happens much more rapidly than biological evolution.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have time for more questions. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. All right, looks like that's it for question and answers.
Great.
Oh, wait, nope, just kidding. One more.
Okay.
Nina, did you have a question? Nope, looks like that's it. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Jennifer Verdolin, for that wonderful webinar. It was just so great. I loved all that. All that information was fabulous. Thank you all for attending. Please check our website often. We have multiple events coming up in the future, and we love having you join us. Thanks again, and be safe and be well.